You know, you really can't be a Christian all by yourself. I mean, think about it. Jesus makes it clear that there's no such thing as a solitary believer. There are some branches of Christianity that don't get this. They act as if being a Christian is just something between you and God. All you have to do is say that you believe in Jesus, and it's all magically taken care of. You're done. Become a Christian? Check. Get saved? Check. Now, what's next on my list for the rest of the day? This is what the theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer called cheap grace. Cheap grace means expecting salvation without discipleship, salvation without commitment, salvation without an answering response. The fact is, to be a Christian is all about relationships. True grace happens when you welcome God into your life in a way that Christ himself shines forth in those relationships. This is what it means to be saved. As it says in the first letter of John, quote, "Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God, for God is love. Those who say, 'I love God,' and hate their brothers and sisters are liars. For those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. The commandment we have from him is this: those who love God must love their brothers and sisters also." Unquote. This is what it really means to be a Christian. But what happens when those relationships break down? How do you respond if someone in the church mistreats you? This is the subject of the gospel readings for this week and for next week. It takes 2 weeks because it's an important topic, and Jesus has a lot to say. Jesus begins by laying out a series of steps. First, he says, you go to the person who has wronged you and try to work it out quietly. If that doesn't work, you invite a couple of others to join you to act as mediators and witnesses. If this too fails, you raise the problem with the whole church. And if this too does not solve the problem, you in Jesus' words, let them be to you as a Gentile or a tax collector. Personally, I shudder at the thought of a problem like this getting to that point. But of course, there are certain extreme situations where this could happen. I think the details of this procedure that Jesus proposes are less important than his overall intent. The most important point here is that when someone treats you badly, it's vital that you can be concerned as much for them as for yourselves. Believe me, this isn't easy. It's natural when you feel that you've been wronged to turn the other person into a bad guy. It's such a temptation just to give yourself over to righteous indignation and begin to list all the ways in which you've been harmed, all the ways that the other behaved badly, and self-righteousness just begins to surge through you like electricity. Your entire focus shifts to showing how innocent you are and how badly you've been wronged. The fact is, though, that even if you are entirely in the right, righteous indignation is a dangerous impulse to give into. It makes you lose sight of the fact that the other is a person too, even if they made a mistake, even if they hurt you. Something we can't lose sight of if we're going to reconcile. The question isn't, or shouldn't be, how can I show this person in no uncertain terms that he's wrong? It is instead, How can I connect with this person who has broken his connection with me? The most inspiring story I've ever heard in this regard is one concerning Nelson Mandela, how he responded to his abusive guards while he was in prison. The story is well known, of course, but it's worth recalling. It began in 1961 when Mandela was arrested for his work for freedom in South Africa. Mandela then spent the next 27 years in prison, 18 of them in the brutal Robben Island prison. Confined to a tiny cell without either bed or plumbing, he was forced daily to perform heavy labor in a quarry. He was permitted to write and send a letter only once every 6 months and was allowed only one visitor a year, and then only for 30 minutes. Everything about the situation was meant to break him in body, mind, and spirit. If ever there was a person who had been wronged, it was he. Mandela's guards were the active fact in this effort to wear him down and break him. They beat him. They insulted him. They belittled him. They made it hard for him in every way they could. Just think how tempting it must have been to respond to their blows and abuse with hatred and with equal doses of equal doses of hatred. Instead, Mandela took another course. Where Mandela spoke English, all the guards were from the Afrikaans community, and they spoke the Afrikaans language, a dialect of Dutch. Slowly, little by little, Mandela taught himself that language and began to speak to his guards in their native tongue. Rather than lashing out in anger at their or indignation, Mandela reacted to their insults and beatings by asking them about their families. He'd express concern for the guards and ask them about themselves. Gradually, he got to know them as they slowly got to know him also. Over time, Mandela not only earned the respect of these men, he eventually earned their friendship too. By the time he finally gained his freedom, some of the guards had even become his supporters. To use Jesus' words, in reaching out to them and treating them as human beings, even those mistreating him, Mandela ended up regaining them. Can we really do this? It's a challenge, isn't it? And what about the truly hardened case of someone who just does not respond no matter what you do? Of course, Jesus says that it may just be better to let them go. As he says, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. And undoubtedly, he's right. There clearly are people who are just so toxic, so destructive to our spiritual health that it is necessary simply to keep them at a distance. And yet even this has a lingering question mark around it. We have only to remember how Jesus himself treated tax collectors after all. The fact is, he didn't reject them. Instead, he went to dinner with them. He called them to be his disciples. Matthew himself was a tax collector after all. Did Matthew smile knowingly as he wrote that part of his gospel about tax collectors? The thing is, we can never lose sight of the main point. No one can be a Christian alone. We're all in this together. As I like to say, we are who we are in relationship with, and we become how we are in relationship with them. And although it's true that God's Spirit is always with each one of us, it is also true that it is in our togetherness, our connectedness to each other, that we truly become the body of Christ. It is then that we are connected to the vine. As Jesus says in John chapter 15, I am the vine, you are the branches. Well, the fact is, we are all the branches. We are connected to God. We are connected to each other. Apart from this, we can do nothing. For as Jesus concludes today's reading, quote, truly I tell you, if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there among them, unquote. In other words, you can't be a Christian alone. Amen.